Hey, Gary, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. For the audience who might not know you very well, can you please introduce yourself and give a little bit of your background?
Sure, Valerie. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this today. So Gary Schwartz, I have been a sales and marketing leader for B2B software companies for the better part of the last 25 years. And most recently in cybersecurity, ed tech and fintech. So I left the corporate world about a year ago now. And the reason I did so, starting a company called What Great Looks Like, is that over the past 25 years, being both a sales and a marketing leader, I've seen the same symptoms over and over again. And I think all your audience will recognize this. As soon as it hits the fan and the company's not making its numbers, the CEO asks her leaders, what's going on? And the sales leader says, well, marketing's not giving us enough leads. And the marketing leader says, we hit our target. You guys can't close the leads that we give you. And it's all the finger pointing. And I've seen it from both sides, so I don't assign blame to it. The CEO, by the way, says, can't you two just fix this? And they can't. If they could have, they would have. And so what we're starting to see more often is, well, the leaders get replaced because we're not hitting our numbers. They don't fix the root cause. And in 18 months, they have the same conversations with the new leaders, and it's rinse and repeat. And I think that's bad for all of us, in career wise. It doesn't have to be that way. And I think there are structural things in the business that need to be addressed that can help both parts of that organization avoid the silos and really work together in a collaborative way to crush their numbers.
That is such a good point because it is finger pointing. And often what I see also doing B2B is that they don't have enough sales, they don't have enough leads, and they do just replace the leader. And then what you're saying, like, it's not even the leader that's like the root cause. There's like structural things behind it. So can you walk me through that?
Totally. And the first thing is, if they're talking about leads, there's a fundamental misalignment in how they're measuring success, right? Leads are not an outcome. And so marketing shouldn't be seen as just a provider of leads to sales. The outcomes that marketing should be judged on is they're creating pipeline. They're creating qualified opportunities for the sales team to go after. And really, that's what the marketing and sales leader should be talking about. And that's what the team should be focused on, is alignment on outcomes. So leads are a path to an outcome. You measure it. But what we should be doing is agreeing, let's talk about how much pipeline we're creating. And then if I think about how I structure and organize the team, well, in teams that have an SDR team or BDRs or whatever we call them when they're in-house, typically I've seen them sat in sales, and that exacerbates the problem because they're waiting for those inbound leads. The way that I've organized this and have built teams that don't have this kind of infighting is I've sat that SDR, BDR team within marketing. It seems counterintuitive because they're sales development reps, and that's okay, because what they want to be when they grow up are salespeople, right? And you can still create that progression path for them. But here's what happens when they sit in marketing. And the other piece of alignment associated with that is I don't pay them to set meetings, because if I just pay them to set meetings, they're going to create a lot of meetings so they get paid, but they don't necessarily go somewhere. So I pay them on opportunities, but the catch is the opportunity's got to be accepted by the sales rep.
Wow.
That forces them to start working together. And they complain. They say, well, I can't control what the sales rep does. And my response is, well, talk to them. Have you asked them? And you create these mentor-mentee relationships. Because again, remember, the SDRs want to become salespeople. So on my teams, they talk a couple of times a week. The SDR learns, well, what is qualified look like? What questions should I be asking? And they're learning selling skills. But while sitting in marketing, they're learning the messaging. They're learning all of those kinds of knowledge and skills. So they actually become better business people when it's time for them to move across into the sales organization for where they want to get in their career. Now, doing it that way, I've built SDR teams that never missed their monthly opportunity target, because that's what we measure them on. And you know what, Valerie, we never talked about leads in that organization.
Wow. This is such a radical different way than I think most of our clients or most of the people I know think about it. So let me digest all of this. So you put the SDRs within the marketing team, and do they literally report to like the chief marketing officer?
Yeah, they reported into me. When I was at a Series A startup, I hired the first two SDRs. They reported directly to me. And what I did with them is I listened to their calls.
Mm-hmm.
We coached them a lot. And then the thing is, my partner in sales, the sales leader, also spoke with them and coached them. So we didn't, even though we sat them in marketing and we created a structure for their success to be around opportunities, we didn't get crazy about who can talk to them and who can't talk to them, because we had a good, the sales leader and I, we talk to each other every day. And I've never had a relationship with a sales leader like that, where we were like in each other's pockets. And we didn't, we didn't agree on everything, but we had very respectful discussions and we got to good places. But that tone was set for the rest of the organization, and it encouraged everybody to be collaborative. So, when he had things to talk about to the SDRs, that was cool because we were all moving in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that makes sense. I would say some of the best content creation we've put out there have come from sales, like discovery calls, because once you start hearing what a client is actually saying to you, I feel like I'm behind, I feel like I'm not meeting my quotas, that kind of becomes the language that marketing can use to increase their marketing. So it makes sense on a lot of fronts.
But that's so true. And when I've been a sales leader, we didn't have that level of collaboration, and the marketing team never asked the sales team, what are you hearing? Wow. And that, that was my big learning. That was my best marketing training, was being in sales, because what I learned was marketing's got to be talking to its colleagues, to our colleagues in sales. Does this message resonate? Does this make sense to you? What are you hearing? What objections are you getting? And how can we use all of, you guys are the eyes and ears of the company. How can we use what you're learning to make us better at our messaging, so that we get more revenue and we 100%. Make it easier for you? And I'm so glad you said that, because that's such an important part of that collaboration.
Oh yeah, 100%. And the next thing you mentioned is about commissions. So I always tell people salespeople are salespeople. So when they ask me if they should give a bonus to our SDRs who are somewhere else, I'm like, yes, if that is your team culture, do it. Because again, salespeople literally are salespeople everywhere, and everybody wants the commission. But how, again, would you set it up so you don't just do it on appointments set? Because that makes sense. They might set a bunch of bad appointments. The show up rate might be bad because they didn't follow up with them. There's so many things. So do you only give a bonus if that lead converts to a sale, or if it was accepted as a decent opportunity?
The way that I set it up for my SDRs, and there's loads of different ways to do this, but I'll just tell you what I've seen work, and I'm sure there's other ways. But I paid my SDRs, so I tiered them. They'll be level 1, level 2, level 3, and they would have a certain target of how many opportunities were they responsible for creating per month. They'd have a monthly target. And I believe I paid them sort of the 2/3 base, 1/3, call it commission. And in that particular business, we didn't pay them on closed won business. But let's say the SDR had to create 12 opportunities a month. We gave them a cliff if they created, I think it was 80%. So 9 or 10 in order to get their variable. But then, so they had an OTE, whatever it was, that 1/3, they would get that on their target, which was 12. And they had the ability to exceed their targets. So if they hit 15 or 17, it was a sliding scale, and you got kind of more per opportunity if you were over exceeding, because it was encouraged to move things up. And then as they progressed through the career, so every quarter, like if they hit their target every month, they'd move up to the next level. Now their base would increase, their OTE would increase, and their target would increase. Right. But they had that much more experience. And again, my teams as a group never missed their targets during the time that we were doing that. I do like the idea of adding some sort of commission for the closed won business, because I think it further reinforces, you want to compensate people on the behaviors you want them to show.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just further reinforces that they've got skin in the game as who they're talking to, how they're creating. It's not just, all right, let's get a qualified opportunity out there. But if we can impact the conversion rate of those, we get a little bit more. I think it makes sense.
I think that makes so much sense. Wow. Okay, that's amazing. And I want to also ask you about just leads in general, because that's one of the biggest problems we hear people have. They don't have enough leads. So sometimes they will hire our cold callers to do 200, 300 calls a day. And then all of a sudden, our cold callers can go through a list so fast. So what would you say about how do you create leads and what does it look like in today's world?
Let me start by asking you a question. Out of those 300 calls a day, how many of them are actually answered?
Oh, the pickup rate, probably 1/3. So if they dial 300 people, 100 might pick up the phone.
And so they'll have 100. That's higher than I would have expected. That's good. That's 100 conversations. Here's the thing. I think the way that B2B buyers buy has changed dramatically over the years. And this is something I'll be speaking a lot about in the coming months. Back when marketing automation tools first appeared, and they could track things. All of a sudden, you could track buyer behavior. We could see how many pages did they visit on the website, how many emails did they open or click. And, as soon as they filled in a form, we knew who they were, and then we could track everything they did because we dropped a cookie on their machines. And so because you could track all that, we could say, well, Valerie's all over our website. She must be ready to buy. Whereas Gary is not engaged with any of the content that we've been sending. And so we call you a marketing qualified lead, but you're not qualified really, right? We don't know that you're actually buying. And so we would take all of these marketing qualified leads and send them, whether to the SDRs or to external agencies to help, making those contacts. And because we determined it with really what is an arbitrary score, the hit rate isn't always great. And what is happening is that as over the last several years, certainly since COVID, buyers want to be more in control of that. So they don't want, to be called 5 minutes after they've filled in a form to download a 50-page report, right? And so they tend not to fill in forms because they know they're going to get contacted. So that reduces the quality in general of whatever MQLs are being created. People who are actually may have a say in buying aren't supplying their names. They don't want to be contacted. But that said, we can still track what companies and how many people from those companies are engaging with content. There are tools that allow for that. And by the nature of the content they're consuming, we can see where are they in the buying stage. That allows for outreach, for kind of better outreach to those companies. But here's the catch. You don't necessarily have a list of people because they haven't given us their name. But if we've done enough research that says, here's our ICP, right? Our target, ideal customer profile. So that's here's the set of companies that we're going after, whether it's by industry or however we determine that by size. And here are the people, the key personas in that ICP. So if I can say to you, okay, American Express has been all over our website, and here's the list of people from American Express who are most likely to be in a buying committee, that allows us to give you a more targeted list, but you can contact them and give them content that's appropriate to where they are in the buying cycle. Are they just getting started? Are they researching the problems that we solve? Are they starting to get a vendor list together? Are they ready to have conversations? Because the thing is, they are more likely to have a short list before they do outreach to the company. And the first company that they reach out to is like 84% of the time going to be the one they buy from. So, but you can influence that by making the correct outreach at the right time based on what you know of where they are in the buying journey. And so that's really how it's changed. And the idea that just because you've been all over the website, that doesn't make you ready to buy. So the
Right.
MQL is kind of becoming an archaic metric, a
Wow.
deprecated metric. But you still measure these things because you still want to understand how good are we doing? How well are we converting people
Hmm.
at various stages in the cycle? But I think there needs to be a rethink of what those stages look like. But once you've had
Wow.
contact with people, and to your point earlier, the better you are at qualifying them, the more likely they are to turn up for the meeting. They're more likely the meeting's going to go well and it's going to be
Mhm.
qualified. So a lot of that doesn't change. You still have to follow those metrics and optimize on your conversion path. But how we think about that is rapidly changing.
That it is changing a lot. And in terms of reaching out to people, do you have a preference on how it's done? Do you think a cold call, an email, a LinkedIn message, an Instagram DM, all of the above? What do you think is most appropriate?
It's a little bit of all of the above, but I'll tell you, an SDR leader who worked for me, one of the best in the business, and he has guided me on cadences for other teams.
Mm-hmm.
And his way of doing it is first, put a connection request or otherwise touch them, right, on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn, but don't immediately try to sell to them, right?
Agreed.
Post from what, your company's, your social media team is saying, here's the content that we should be sharing. Here's what we should be posting. Get into their feed. And then after a short period of time, you can start your outreach. But ideally what you're doing is creating a credibility for yourself and for your organization that you can solve their problem. Because the other big kind of eye-opening fact that's come to light is that not everyone in your TAM, right, in your total addressable market is actually in market for a solution like yours at any given time.
Right.
And so maybe 10% of your TAM is in market for a solution. Now, if you're lucky enough to hit them when they're thinking about you, that's great. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're not doing all this, they call it pitch slapping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Outreach is going to be counterproductive because when they are ready, they're going to say, well, these people just annoyed me. And
Agreed. Yep. There's been so many people I've added on LinkedIn, had a friendly message with, and then on the eighth post they see of mine, they're like, hey, I actually do need an SDR now. And it worked because I had great contact. I had established a relationship, but I never sold them anything. I never sent them a spammy message. And then at the right time, I was the first person that they reached out to because of that strategy that you just shared.
And there you go, because when they're ready to reach out, the first person they reach out to, 5 out of 6 times is going to be the one they buy from. So, I mean, and that's a great strategy and you're doing it the right way. It's
Mm-hmm.
be in their head when they're ready to buy, but you can't assume they're ready to buy at any given time.
Exactly. Yep. So that's one of my pet peeves is when I receive those messages on LinkedIn or email that are very spammy, like never met you before and you just sold me a solution in the most annoying way. I'm curious, what are your pet peeves like in the sales and marketing world?
Oh, it's the outreach from the same group of people
Mm-hmm.
that, tell me, oh, I can increase this about your business.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones that really upset me are the ones where what they're saying they can do, if they had spent any time looking at me in my business, they'll realize it's wholly inappropriate. Like, let's just
Uh-huh.
say app developers. So I'm not building apps. I'm not selling apps, but people who say we can reduce your costs on app development.
100%. I
Okay.
get ones that pitch me for like, hey, Val, I saw you might be needing a virtual assistant from the Philippines. If you spent 2 seconds on my LinkedIn, you would know that we provide virtual assistants from Africa. It's like part of our mission. Um, so yeah, they spent no time on it. It's such a waste. It's so frustrating.
And I've had people tell me all of the things that they can do for the company that I worked for 4 years ago.
Same.
That
Oh my goodness. I don't understand how in this day and age that is happening. Like, isn't that a no-brainer that people can't do that? What is
they've
happening?
bought a list, right? They must
Okay.
have bought a list. They haven't vetted the list
Mm-hmm.
and they got my LinkedIn profile, but they haven't bothered to check it to see is what they think they thought up to date. So I hate, and then there's the ones that say that they've got some sort of auto cadence going every 2 days. And by the fifth message that I haven't responded to, they say, well, is it us? A, B, or C? Pick the answer. And I think that became a trend like 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know how, because I can't imagine it ever worked for anybody. But a lot of different companies seem to be doing that. But I don't respond to it because it just encourages them.
It does encourage them. You're right. But it does pain me. It physically hurts me a little bit. Oh my goodness. Okay. So back on track. I know you mentioned ICP earlier, and I know you have a good story about that. So tell me more about, when it comes to ICPs, what your approach is.
Well, that's another good example, Valerie, of sales and marketing alignment. Because focus comes from leadership. Right? The CEO, the executive team, they say, here is our target market. Here's who we're going to go after. And in the places where I've seen that break down, where they had the finger pointing and they're not getting enough leads, the sales team, because they do these things for the right reasons, because they want to generate the right outcomes. They want to make their money. They want to do great for the business. And if they feel they're not being supplied well, what they do is they go off and, they say, okay, well, I've got some people that I know that I should be calling up because they're friendlies. And they find other ways that defocus them from the markets that they really ought to be aligning on. And it's nobody's fault, but it happens, right? Where that lack of alignment is. So leadership should be defining, here is the target market that we're going to go after now. And the way that I've done this in other businesses is we call this our mountain strategy. And the idea was, let's hone down on an industry where the market exists for us. We have had success, so we can tell great customer stories and get customers to do, participate, webinars, whatever kinds of things. And let's build material that allows us as a marketing organization to create all this material and all this activity. And as a sales organization can work alongside us targeting these groups. We all focus on that together, and let's dominate that industry or that market, because it might be a company size as opposed to an industry vertical, depending on the business. And when you do that, right, you conquer that mountain. And then this is true for larger as well as smaller companies. But if you're an earlier stage company, right, you get focused on that. When you've succeeded, then you choose your next mountains. But because you got a cookie cutter that you can now replicate, you don't have to do them one at a time. You can do, let's say we did one mountain. Now we're going to do 3 mountains, and the marketing and sales teams get aligned on that. Sales will have their territories, whether it's industry, whether it's geography or so on.
Sure.
And so that's where I've seen it done well. And I had an interesting conversation with a company I was advising last year. I said, what's your ICP? And this was an early stage startup. And they said, it's the Fortune 1000. And I thought, well, that's an aspiration of who you want to sell to. Let's look at where you've had success. And it's not that hard. You walk through their sales force. You can do some very good analysis of where have they had success, where have they had good deal size, and probably most important, who's been sticky, right? Because what ideally you want to do is build a customer base that's going to stay with you. And as you're doing that analysis, that forms the ICP. And there are companies today that are automating that and building products around helping you figure out what's the ICP that's going to deliver your highest lifetime customer value.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's something that's like on my to-do list to dive more into. So this is a good reminder even for me. To start to wrap up, if there's a CEO out there listening to this and they think, okay, our sales and marketing teams do not get along, or we're not working cohesively, or I think I might need to replace a sales and marketing leader until I listen to this podcast and maybe I'm rethinking that. How do you first start working with a client, and how do they know if they might be a good match to reach out to you after this?
Well, the first thing that I will do once I'm engaged with the client is I'll do an assessment of their go-to-market motion. And I do it largely through a marketing lens. So I will look at their product marketing, which includes their ICP, their product market fit, their persona messaging. We'll look at their demand gen engine, their customer marketing, brand, operations, and organization. We'll do an assessment. That'll be done within 30 days. And that assessment will include an action plan that will help fill the gaps. And then from there, they may have a team that they want to do that themselves, or I've got loads of people in my network that I can bring to bear to execute, on that action plan. But if people are if they know that they've got that misalignment and they've been banging their heads around, how do I fix this? Sometimes it takes, outside eyes to say, okay, what's the root cause of the misalignment? Because I've spoken to investors who say, well, we don't get involved in that. That's like the CEO's problem. But that's a reflection of their feeling that it's a personality issue. And it's not. They hire good leaders, and these are talented people who are working again to get to where they want to go. But that misalignment, whether it's on the organizational structure, whether it's on the metrics and how they, the key objectives, right, that they're looking at, sometimes they'll need another set of eyes to help them figure that out and navigate through that. And really get to where they're wanting to go. But in my experience, when you build that, when you've got that cohesion, when you have that level of collaboration and trust, those organizations have crushed their numbers. And the place that I've been in, we tripled our pipeline, we tripled our revenue in 1 year, and we never, ever talked about leads.
Wow. That's like turns marketing and sales upside down, like your approach, but then you have the results to show it. That's so cool.
Thank you. It's one go-to-market team. That's really how they should think.
Yeah.
But when I write a book, it's going to be called Sales is from Mars, Marketing is from Venus. So
that's so great. Please write that book. Okay. So to close off, we always ask all of our guests, have you ever been to the African continent? Because we always tie it back to Africa somehow. If no, where would you like to go?
So unfortunately, I have never had the pleasure of being in Africa. It's a place, it's a large place, right? Mm-hmm. And so places I've, wanted to visit. My wife's best friend is from South Africa originally. And I think she grew up in Durban, and she tells us, all these amazing stories. She was, in the performing arts profession. She did a one-woman show down there. And so we heard all this like amazing stuff. So South Africa is very high on my list of places to visit.
You cannot go wrong with South Africa. I know it's like, people say it's like touristy because that's where everybody mentions, but it's honestly beautiful. Like when I went, I started in Cape Town. I worked my way down the coast. I did go to Durban. So cool. Joburg, you can do like safaris. You can do all the things you'd want to do in South Africa. So I think it's a great country to start in.
Well, absolutely. And for me, I love going to different parts of the world. That's one I haven't been able to go to, but meeting the people and understanding what it's like to live there, so I try to avoid the touristy stuff because it's like, I don't go to see things. I go to understand how people live. But I kind of think I would get that level of variety and just meet really cool people down there.
I think you can get the best of both worlds. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, if you go to South Africa, let me know. We have friends, we have team members there, we have all kinds of connections, so we can help you out. But in the meantime, Gary, thank you for joining us today. Can you tell people where to find you?
Absolutely. So they can find me at whatgreatlooks.like.com, and it has hyphens, so all the dashes between the words. And on YouTube, I've got a podcast as well. And if they go to YouTube and search for What Great Looks Like with the dashes, they'll find that. And there's loads of material there about, understanding those problems. And I talk to other experts who again demonstrate what great looks like for their businesses, so we can bring all that to bear. But those are two best places to find me.
Cool. And we will link all of that in the show notes. So Gary, thank you for joining us today. I personally learned so much, and I'm so happy that you could be here today.
And thanks so much. Really, really happy that you invited me to be here, and really enjoyed the conversation, Val. Thank you.